Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly FPL podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are usually joined by a different guest, but sadly today our guest can't make it due to the weather in the UK. The train lines are completely flooded. I somehow did get here, but our guest can't make it, so it will be a solo pod today. And just a little bit of housekeeping, you will notice that there wasn't an episode last week. I was sadly very, very ill. That was actually going to be with James from Planet FPL, who's one of the most highly demanded guests for FPL Therapy, so we'll absolutely reschedule that. Obviously, I'm solo podding this week. Next week, the episode will still go live, but remember that it's a midweek deadline, so it's going to be going live on the Monday. So normally it goes live at Tuesday at 8 a.m. That's when I try to make it go live. It'll be going live on the Monday afternoon. Basically, as soon as I've edited it, it will go out for you, and that should be then before the midweek deadline. So basically, you're going to get 2 solo pods in a row, and it's just going to be me doing lots of rambling about FPL, but hopefully that should help you for the busy period coming up. Also, this podcast is sponsored by Club, the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. I'm going to talk a lot about Club throughout the coming weeks and months, and also later in today's episode, you'll see my latest club, how it's been upgraded, and some of the players that I might be able to pull as well. Final thing, before we actually get on to discussing FPL, please do rate 5-star if you enjoy these podcast episodes. It massively supports me more than you know. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to drop a like and rate and subscribe as well. Right, we got through all of that. So, game week 12, let's briefly review how it went for me and how my season's going thus far, because it has slightly improved, although it's still not fully there. And then after that, we'll go through how the games went in game week 12, some of the players that stood out, and look ahead to game week 13 and beyond. And we have game weeks coming thick and fast. Like I said, we've got a midweek deadline soon as well. So in game week 12, at the time of me recording, it's not actually completely finished because we still have the Newcastle-West Ham game. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon, but I am 64 points all out, of course, dependent upon the bonus points potentially changing at the last second. So that is now 713 points for me this season, which is about a rank of around 750k at the time of me recording. And it was another green arrow. It was a really weird week because everyone in my team blanked bar 3 players. And usually if that happens, you're in for an absolute disaster of a game week. But for me, it actually went quite well because 2 of those players went pretty nuclear. So in goal, I had Sanchez. He conceded in the final moments of the game. And we're going to discuss Chelsea, Leicester and all of the other games very soon. But that was frustrating because he conceded in the final moments. And he also picked up a booking for what was a very, very silly booking as well. Basically wasting time. Then with the defense, we've got Gabriel, Ait-Nouri and Leif Davis. Ait-Nouri and Leif Davis, of course, did blank. Gabriel gets the clean sheet. Arsenal looking really strong defensively. And as soon as Erdegaard comes back in, they immediately just look better as a team. On the bench, I did have Vandenberg with a 6-pointer. In hindsight, I should have played him, but Brentford never keep clean sheets. I think he's got 1 point in every game apart from 1 this season where he got 2. So I wasn't expecting much from Vandenberg. The midfield, very disappointing, bar Mohamed Salah. So Rodgers, Mbeumo and Palmer all blanked. And then, Mohamed Salah with the brace. Up to the point of the brace, it didn't feel like he did that much in the game from an FPL perspective, but of course, he took the goal well. Then he was the one that created the penalty, took the penalty well. And then after that, he missed 2 or 3 huge chances. So in all fairness, he could have come away with 3 or 4 goals in that game. And it just goes to show what Mohamed Salah is all about. So I'm very glad I did give him the armband. And then for the front 3, we've got Cunha, Rao, and Haaland. Raul Jimenez and Haaland continue to disappoint. We'll talk about my team at the end in terms of future plans. They are 2 players that I'm very happy to say goodbye to in the near future, potentially even this week. And then the superstar was Cunha. If not for Cunha, this is a disaster week, really. It would be Mohamed Salah plus Gabriel was my only return. So I'm delighted he did. And I find it quite surprising because if you'd have asked me about my 7 attackers at the start of the game week, who do you think will be your lowest scoring attacker? I probably would have said Cunha because he's playing against a very resolute Fulham team. And we're going to discuss that game because I know it was 4-1 and I know Cunha's come away with a 16-pointer, but I don't feel like that fully reflects the way that the game went. But FPL is unpredictable. Football's unpredictable, and you just got to hope that the players that you've picked are good and that they do the points, which is exactly what they did for me. So that's 64 points at the time of recording. That's a small green arrow up to about 750k, and my season is starting to trend in the right direction now. Hopefully, I'm no longer going to be in the millions ever again, and we can start to improve, get into the top 500k, top 250, and then maybe around Christmas, if we can sneak inside the top sort of 200k, maybe optimistically top 100k, that will be the aim for me. So that was how my game week went. Do let me know in the comments how many points you've managed in game week 12. And let's now go through each of the games, some of the players that stood out, how some of the teams performed, some of the data, some of the things I picked up via the eye test, and how that might affect our decisions moving forward. And we'll start with Leicester-Chelsea. I actually think Chelsea were incredibly dominant in this game. So to present some data to you, they actually accumulated 2.91 non-penalty expected goals, which was the highest of any team in Game Week 12, including 4 big chances and 11 shots in the box. So an incredibly dominant performance from an attacking perspective. They really should have scored more than 2. If you did see, Cole Palmer shot from about 3 yards out and Madueke blocked it on the line. But you're probably looking in a normal game at least 3, if not 4 goals there. And also, which is the more interesting stat, they actually conceded the lowest non-penalty expected goals of the game week 2. So if you remove the penalty, and of course you shouldn't just remove a penalty, but from open play, they had the best defensive data in the league as well for game week 12. So the best attacking performance and the best defensive performance, if you ignore the silly mistake for the penalty. This is the issue, though, with Chelsea, right? Because we keep pointing to the fact they are in the top 5 for non-penalty expected goals conceded. So Chelsea aren't a bad defence in terms of they're not giving up a high quality and quantity of chances on a consistent basis. But what Chelsea are extremely error prone. They give away a lot of penalties. They've given away quite a few this season already that are just silly. They give the ball away at the back. They pass it to the opposition attackers. They don't instill you with confidence. And I think that starts with Robert Sanchez, who, by the way, of course, is my goalkeeper. He's just not very good, is he? I mean, that's why Brighton dropped him for Still at the time, because he can't play out the back. It feels very chaotic. And a goalkeeper should instill confidence in the defense. We're going to discuss Onana later, but that is a goalkeeper. When he's got the ball at his feet, you feel confident. He's really good shot stopper. Raya is another really good example of he just instills confidence. I'll give an example of another goalkeeper that doesn't really, and that's Vicario from Spurs, but mainly from set pieces. You know, when a goalkeeper's flapping and they look anxious, Pickford does it sometimes. I feel like it starts from the goalkeeper, and from there, they just make so many mistakes. So, yeah, Chelsea's defensive data continues to look really good, but they do just find a way to concede goals, and it is very frustrating if you had like a Colwill or a Sanchez. Palmer was very interesting in that game. He was dropping deep quite a lot, and upon reflection, maybe this wasn't the best game for him, and it's very hindsighty, but Leicester do sit pretty deep now. I mean, they never used to in the past, but now they are pretty much a low block team. And whilst Palmer can bully those teams, like we saw it with like Burnley and Luton last year, he's also best in transition-based games, I would say. If you look at the Brighton game and the 25-pointer, the reason he did so well is Brighton go for it, and Chelsea kept catching them in transition. So I wonder whether the best games for Cole Palmer will continue to be those transition-based games. And I look ahead to Aston Villa in game week 13. We'll talk about captaincy a little bit later because captaincy is wide open this week. I do just wonder whether Cole Palmer in that sort of game might be more favourable than in a game against a team that low blocks. Southampton in game week 14, assuming he plays, by the way, because it is a midweek game, we could see a bit of rest for some players. It does feel like a really decent fixture for him because Southampton, whilst they will sit in low block sometimes, they're also a team that will go for it and they'll move up the pitch with their possession-based football. So it might be that Cole Palmer can catch them in transition. I was watching the likes of Dominic Szoboszlai against Southampton, and it just felt like a fixture that could suit Cole Palmer quite a lot. So yeah, I wasn't massively blown away by Cole Palmer in this game, but then again, in hindsight, I wonder if it's not the sort of game that suits him that much. And if Madueke had just simply moved out the way a little bit better, Cole Palmer would have been coming away with a goal and probably bonus points. And if I'm sat here and he got us a 9 or 10 pointer, then we're probably not even having this chat. It's the fact that you, of course, blanked against Leicester. Enzo Fernandez was really interesting. I don't know if this will continue. If you're a Chelsea fan, let me know. But Enzo was basically playing as a dual 10. I think it was the nature of the opposition, the fact they were sat in a low block, but Enzo was playing quite far forward. And in all honesty, he looked just as good as Cole Palmer. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and buy Enzo Fernandez rather than Cole Palmer, but it's something that we should maybe reassess. The only other player to really discuss was Nicholas Jackson, who continues to just look so good. He's just really finishing his chances. He looks more mature. His temperament and mentality look a lot stronger this season. There's very little bad that I would like to say about Jackson. I mean, the real criticism in the past has been either his mentality and his temperament or the fact that he just doesn't finish the chances. And as of right now, everything just looks a lot stronger for him. He's one of the best forwards in the league. The movement, the positioning, the actual clinical nature of the finishes. What bad is there to say? My concern with Nicholas Jackson, because there were a lot of questions about sort of Jackson versus Isak and should I pick up Jackson this week? I actually think the Villa game will suit him. My concern isn't anything about Jackson himself. It's two things. Firstly, he's on 4 yellow cards. And I've been saying this now for, I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe he's been on 4 yellows and he's still not picked up that 5th yellow card. But as soon as he does, he gets suspended for a game. And obviously that's not ideal. Like if you brought in an Isak or a Watkins, unless they get injured or pick up a red card, well, then they're not going to miss a game anytime soon. So immediately with Jackson, you've got one less game. Now, he might not pick up that yellow, or he might pick it up in a week where it works anyway because you don't mind benching him. So it could all work out. The only other concern is Christopher Nkunku is still a very, very good alternative. And game week 14 against Southampton away is a midweek deadline. So my concern with Nicholas Jackson is Nkunku has been playing the midweek games, especially in Europe. Could we see Nkunku start the Southampton game just to give Nkunku the minutes and also to make sure that Jackson isn't run into the ground? If I were to predict now, I think Nkunku starts the Southampton game. And at the very least, he's coming on around the 60th minute. I think it will be an even earlier sub than we've seen in the past for Jackson. So I don't want to put you off of him, but those are the reasons that I've not jumped on him at this point. But he continues to deliver time and time again. So maybe you say, you know what? Yeah, he might be benched against Southampton. And yes, he might miss a game, or he will probably miss a game due to the yellow cards. But I still feel like in the games that he's on the pitch, he's going to be worth it. And I do think Nicholas Jackson will be. So let me know what you think, but it's probably enough to put me off for now. The only other two players is just the fact that they missed out, which was Gusto and Neto. Apparently, Gusto missed out due to illness, and I still maintain that he's probably a very good option, given that there are murmurings around Chelsea at the moment that Reece James could be out until 2025. So Gusto could have at least a month, maybe 6 weeks in him, and that's assuming that Reece James can stay fit. Now, they could play other players at right back, but I still think that Gusto, if he can stay fit himself, is a really, really decent option below that 5 million price tag. And then obviously Neto missed out as well. Apparently he picked up a small knock during the international break and didn't want to risk it. So it sounds like he'll be back and available. But I just don't know if I'd want to go for any Chelsea attackers outside of Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson. Let's assess over the coming weeks, but I don't think there's any rush this week necessarily. From a Leicester perspective, I don't think they were particularly good. I think the scoreline does flatter them. But then again, I don't think they're the worst team in the league. And maybe they can start to pick up some points over the coming games. But from an FPL perspective, there's absolutely no one that I want from Leicester. The next game to discuss was Arsenal versus Forest. So Arsenal 3, Forest 0. This was just vintage Arsenal. Arsenal at their very best under Arteta. And it is no surprise that now Ødegaard is back fit and playing well, that Arsenal are starting to tick. And this really was the Ødegaard and Saka show. We have been saying week after week, especially in FPL Therapy, that Saka has been brilliant in the absence of Ødegaard, like he truly has. But he's having to take so much of the creative burden and responsibility. And also, he's just got no one to link up with. So yes, he's creating from that right-hand side. And yes, he's still playing well and getting the points. But he's not had that person to bounce off of as much. Like Havertz has tried to drop into that role and he just can't do it. As soon as Ødegaard's back, Saka looks even better. And he's getting a lot closer to goal as well. And that's the key thing from an FPL perspective. Yeah, his creativity might actually drop slightly with Ødegaard back. But you would expect that that goal threat definitely improves. He had 5 shots in the box, 4 key passes. I can't get over how good Ødegaard and Saka are in that pocket on the right-hand side. So I just think this makes Arsenal better from an attacking perspective. And the more that Arsenal can keep possession and sustain pressure, this is a very underrated thing for a defender as well. Like from a defensive perspective, if they can hold on to the ball, it makes them better because they can't concede if they've got the ball. So I just expect this to improve Arsenal in general. They're now going into a really, really nice fixture run. So their fixtures are West Ham United, Fulham, Everton, Crystal Palace, Ipswich. Honestly, apart from the United game, based on what we saw under Amorim's first game, that's not a particularly difficult one. It's just a really nice run now until about game week 22 or 23. So this really does feel like an extremely good point to jump on Arsenal. Let's see how obviously West Ham get on against Newcastle today, but they would have to do quite a lot for me to suggest that it isn't a great time to target the likes of Saka and also probably a Gabriel. Havertz was given a full rest. I do think it was just a rest. I have, though, seen a few Arsenal accounts, and this is Twitter, by the way, which is quite a toxic place anyway, but on social media suggesting, actually, Arsenal look a little bit better without Havertz in the team. Now, I don't think in a million years we see Havertz drop out the starting 11 on a consistent basis, but it does go to show that they can win games without him. Last season, he was actually rested, I think, 2 games in a row or in quick succession around the end of November, beginning of December. And then from there on in, he just went and started every game. So maybe it was just a bit of a rest. He did play for Germany in the international break. So if you've got Havertz, I wouldn't be stressing now. Obviously, if he gets another benching soon, then maybe it's something that we reassess. The other player that was benched in that game was actually Chris Wood. Again, I think that was international travel. He was probably very jet lagged. He played a lot of minutes. Yes, we've seen him in the past come back from international duty and play a lot of minutes, but it does feel like Chris Wood has played a lot of minutes this season for club and country. So I'm not surprised that he had a rest. He almost got an assist off the bench as well. So if you've got Chris Wood playing against Ipswich at home in game week 13, you absolutely hold. But beyond that, Forest fixtures really aren't looking very good. So after Ipswich, it's City, United, Villa, Brentford, Spurs. there are some good games in there for an attacker, right? The likes of Brentford and Spurs concede chances, even Man United as well. But it's not a run of fixtures that I would rather have Chris Wood to say someone like a João Pedro. So I do think that Chris Wood is probably a sell, but I would wait obviously until the Ipswich game. You definitely keep him that. He's even a potential captaincy shout. The only other player that I wanted to discuss is actually Timber. So we know that Ben White is out for, I think Arteta's quote was many months or months and months. So Ben White could be out for potentially up to 2 or 3 months, a minimum of a month. So Timber is going to be getting very good minutes. The concern is they can play Partey at right back who inverts. But I just think based on how good Timber looked as what was really a traditional right back, he looked very much how Ben White does, but he looked even better. And Timber is a very technically gifted footballer. He had a goal disallowed. He cut the ball back to Saka from about 5 or 6 yards out. He had another chance that he created as well. Timber really should have come away from this game with a goal or an assist or both, and a potential clean sheet. I really think he could be excellent value. It's just about how you predict his minutes and how many games he starts. He'll be benched in a game. He will. He's not going to start every game because of his injury record so far for Arsenal and the fact that there are midweek games. So you can't expect Timber to start every game. But if you think he starts 7 of the next 8, he might be worth the saving over Saliba because he's going to have the attacking threat that Saliba just doesn't. So I still think Gabriel is the best Arsenal defender, but I really like the idea of moving for a Urian Timber as well. So I think that's it, really. Honestly, watch the highlights if you haven't. Saka was unbelievable. Should have really come away with more in that game. You can even ignore the data. Like, the data was pretty good, but just watch the game. Saka was in the box so much, getting chances. And Ødegaard being back is just perfect for them. So yeah, really looking good for Arsenal now. Defenders and attackers. I think in an ideal world, you probably have Gabriel, Timber and Saka. I think if I was on a wildcard, I'd have those 3. You could, of course, just have David Raya or Saliba, or you could leave that third Arsenal slot open and maybe have like a Havertz or Ødegaard. But for me, Saka and Gabriel should be top of the priority list at the moment. Villa Palace was an interesting game. I don't know if I would have predicted a 2-2. I think I probably would have predicted Villa to win this game, but they are struggling. And it's a shame because I saw all of these rumours coming out from Aston Villa during the international break that Emery hasn't left Bodymoor Heath, which is Aston Villa's training ground, and he's been analysing every game this season over and over again, and he thinks he's found a solution to why they've been struggling. And I saw all these quotes coming out, and yes, they should have probably won this game, but at the same time, it still wasn't the dominant performances that we saw from him last season. What I would say is Ollie Watkins looked very much back. So I don't know if it was the fact that he just got a bit of a rest. I don't know if it was the fact that there was a bit of a tactical switch, but he had 1.29 non-penalty expected goals in this game. He had 2 big chances from open play, which was the joint highest in the game week. So it was a really good performance in terms of getting those chances. He obviously scored a goal as well. So yeah, I still think that Ollie Watkins is probably being underrated as an option over the next 3 or 4 weeks. After Chelsea, they play Brentford at home and Southampton at home. It's difficult to get much better than those back-to-back at home. So I do think if you're looking to replace Haaland this week, like I am myself, and I will discuss that, Isak and Jackson definitely stand out as the more obvious options. I've just got a feeling that Watkins could go fairly big. Like, Chelsea's not the best game this week, I will admit that. I've just said that Chelsea are quite good defensively, but Brentford and Southampton at home, if you're looking to go slightly rogue, you're not convinced by Jackson and Isak. Let's see how Isak gets on tonight, by the way. I expect him to absolutely smash it. Then maybe Ollie Watkins could be a decent shout. The troll himself, Luca Dean, he did get benched for the first time this season after 11 starts in a row in the league. I don't know what to make of this because I always thought this was coming, that he would be benched for Maatsen. But then after he started 11 in a row, and then he was displacing Hernandez as the left back for France in some of their games, I was like, maybe Luca Dean's just unbelievably good. And maybe he won't be rotated because Emery really doesn't rotate that often in comparison to other managers. So I was like, listen, maybe Luca Dean is just going to have seriously good minutes. Nope, he misses a game. What I would say in favour is that he did play for France in the international break, so maybe it was just a bit of a rest. He actually got 3 assists in 1 game in that international break. So maybe it was just a bit of minutes management going into the busy period. And also, I just don't think Maatsen was there. Maatsen looks very much like an unfinished article. I think he's probably better in a back 3 with playing as a left wing back. Luca Dean just looks much better. So I would expect straight away, unless there is an issue that we don't know about, for him to come straight back into the 11. When he came onto the pitch, he looked pretty secure as well. So yes, this does show, which isn't good, that Maatsen will play the odd game, but I think it also shows who is first in the pecking order, and I think that is Luca Dean. So I wouldn't stress too much if you brought him in. I would probably play him over the next few, and I think you're very likely to get starts in all of them. The only other interesting event in that game was actually that Tielemans missed a penalty. Tielemans has a very good penalty record, so there is absolutely the possibility that Tielemans still takes the next penalty because no one else in that team has a particularly good penalty record at senior level. However, Morgan Rogers, during not the last international break, the one before that, he took a penalty for the England under 21s, I think it was, and dispatched of it ridiculously well. It was like, when I say top bins, it was top bins. So I do just wonder, maybe this is a bit of optimism on my part, but I do just wonder, could someone else take the next penalty? And could that be Rodgers? I will just note it's probably John McGinn if someone's going to take it instead of Tielemans, but you never know. The one player that I would be surprised if he takes it is actually Ollie Watkins, because his penalty record is horrific, and he is shown on a number of occasions for England and also for Villa. He just doesn't want to step up and take a penalty. So I wouldn't guess that this makes Ollie Watkins the first choice penalty taker now, but certainly someone other than Tielemans could take the next one. So yeah, Villa 2, Palace 2. Villa really need to turn it on if they want to try and aim for sort of top 4 this season once again. The next game was Bournemouth versus Brighton. I was so excited to see how this game would go because I think both of these are teams that could comfortably break into sort of the top 8 this season. And I think Brighton in particular just look like they've got that extra level on Bournemouth. It was actually a very interesting game. So Bournemouth dominated in terms of total shots, XG, big chances. They definitely had the higher quantity of chances, but they also had a lot of shots from suboptimal areas. And we know that Semenyo does this a lot for Bournemouth, but they shoot on sight. They get the opportunity to take shots and they do it. Brighton definitely had the better set of chances, and they were also the more clinical team as well. And do bear in mind that after Balaba's sending off, that was when they accumulated a lot of their I think 2 or 3 of their big chances were post-red card, and a lot of their XG was therefore accumulated post-red card as well. If you've not seen Balaba's second yellow, I'd be extremely surprised if this isn't appealed and maybe overturned, because Balaba shouldn't have been sent off for that. He did just about catch the leg of Kirkes, I think it was, but it was a really harsh red card, second yellow card. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and appeal that, Bryce. And I don't even know if you can appeal a second yellow. I think you can. But yeah, that was not a deserving red card at all. And after that, it did make it a little bit difficult for Brighton, but they held in. And listen, Brighton are cementing themselves as probably, I would say, a top 6 side in the Premier League at the moment. Arguably top 4. They have been one of the better teams in the Premier League. And they've shown that they can beat anyone, home and away. They're about to both go into a really nice set of fixtures right now. So Brighton, in particular, Southampton at home this week is an incredible entry point. They've then got Fulham away, Leicester away, Palace at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. Right? The next 6 fixtures for Brighton are extremely good. I just think you want a Brighton attacker and maybe a defender right now. I think they are attacking well. I think they're improving in their defensive capabilities as well. The defender feels less important. I wouldn't rush out there, but if you've got a free spot, we'll discuss cheap defenders a bit later. It's difficult to overlook some of the cheaper Brighton assets that you could move for, but especially João Pedro. I mean, the man is unbelievable. He's just going to continue going in price. He's going to be 6 million very, very soon, and he'll still be great value. Honestly, if João Pedro was 7.5 million, 8 million, why is he not still good value at that point? Like, can he not compete with Jackson and with Isak? I'm not saying he's necessarily quite as good, but he's right up there. And so when you're telling me you can get him for sort of 5.6, 5.7, whatever he is now, he keeps going up in price. What more do you want from an asset? The manager loves him. Every press conference, he just talks so highly about João Pedro. He is now mentioned in 3 separate press conferences that João Pedro is the leader on the pitch. He's now mentioned in 3 separate press conferences, or maybe even 4 now, that he is the difference maker. He's the one player on the pitch that can make a difference for Brighton. He's clearly first choice. He's clearly favoured as both, I reckon he's first choice number 9 and first choice number 10. He takes penalties, we believe. Yes, he did get subbed off in the 64th minute, but he's just building his fitness back up. And that's honestly, that's a good thing. You don't want to see him run into the ground straight away, getting back-to-back 90 minutes or something like that. The concern is, in game 14, it is a midweek fixture, right? So for Brighton, that's Fulham away. Could we see him benched or getting really limited minutes? Yes. But I would also argue that's their toughest fixture of the bunch. So if he does miss the midweek fixture, it's not the end of the world. What would be worse is if he plays the midweek fixture and then misses the Leicester away game. But based on what we're seeing, he'll probably just continue getting like 70 minutes. So 70 minutes seems to be enough, right? In less than 90 minutes combined in the last 2 games, he's got 2 goals and 2 assists. I'm not expecting it to continue at that rate, but really, sometimes I know it's going to feel very template, and you might feel that urge, like I sometimes do, to go against the template. But sometimes it's overthinking it. Like, what more can the man do? He's absolutely brilliant. So João Pedro is number one on my priority list. I'll be bringing in João Pedro this week, and I do highly recommend you do the same. I don't normally recommend players with that much certainty and with that much assurance, but I do with João Pedro. He's just, the only concern would be if he picks up a re-injury or you don't think his minutes will be as good. Now, people will point to Welbeck and say, what about Welbeck? Honestly, he looked really good once again. He could have been involved in the returns in that game, and I still do like Welbeck. I just think that João Pedro's minutes will be more secure in the long term, and I just think he's a better FPL asset for 0.4 million cheaper, I believe he is now. So I think it's worth it. Ruta has been playing so well too. I just don't know how secure his minutes are, but he is another really good option. This time, obviously, as a midfielder, I believe. Let me double check that, actually. Ruta is a midfielder, isn't he? He's Jorginho, isn't he, on the app? He's 5.6 million pound midfielder. So Jorginho Ruta, I think if you're looking for a cheap midfielder, he could get good minutes. Probably the midfielder I would go for, though, is Kaoru Mitoma. So Mitoma's minutes have just been unbelievable. I'm just going to read out his minutes. Well, I won't even read them out. Since game week 1, he's played over 84 minutes in every game bar one, which was game week 8 against Newcastle when he was on the bench. And actually, in a lot of those, he's got 88 minutes plus. He is basically an 85-minute man every single week. And that's in a team that has rotation. Like, going into the busy period, someone like a Ruta is probably going to cause you issues, whereas Mitoma just seems to be very nailed on. He picked up his 5th attacking return this season, so 2 goals and 3 assists. I would say if you watch Brighton, though, let's not even look at data, let's just say watching Brighton, Mitoma feels less talismanic than he did under De Zerbi for Hertzler. He feels less like the main man. He feels less important. He feels like a system player, if I had to try and explain what Mitoma is, which isn't an issue, by the way, as we can see. 5 returns already this season, and maybe that will pick up with the better fixtures because Brighton's fixtures haven't been that good. But I think João Pedro is that guy, right? So if you're prioritizing one, it's João Pedro. If you're looking for a midfielder, though, at his price, I really do like Kaoru Mitoma. I think he's 6.6 million, 6.4 million. Oh, wow. I really like Kaoru Mitoma then. I think obviously he's that step above the likes of Semenyo and Rodgers, right? So Smith Rowe, if you're looking at that price, no. But he's almost like a nice middle ground between then you get to the likes of Gordon and then Burmo, etc., Jared Bowen. So if you've got up to sort of 6.5, I definitely think you could do well than Kaoru Mitoma. And his data's not bad at all. He's got more goal threat than assist threat, which I really do like. And I think João Pedro being back in the 11 will actually help Mitoma. We saw if you've not yet seen, the assist for Mitoma's goal. It was a beautiful little pass by João Pedro behind the line. Mitoma's run was great and he took his goal well. So yeah, I really like Mitoma too. Just from a Bournemouth perspective, they've also got really good fixtures coming up. So they've got Wolves, Spurs, Ipswich, West Ham, United, Palace over the next 6. Nowhere near as good for me as that Brighton run of fixtures. But also, there's no games that you desperately hate playing your players in, especially the attackers. Now, Semenyo is serving his 5 yellow card suspension in game week 13. So he picked up his 5th yellow card. So Semenyo is out for game week 13, which obviously isn't good because it's Wolves away. So then you're going to have him for Spurs at home, which isn't an awful fixture. We just don't know which version of Spurs will turn up. Then Ipswich, West Ham, United, Palace. It's really not a bad run of fixtures there. So if I had Semenyo, I think I'd ideally like to hold on. I still really like Evanilson, right? He's not too expensive. My concern with Evanilson is I think it's worth having one mid-price forward, whether that be Jackson, Isak, Watkins, right? Maybe even a Solanke. I think it's worth having that price point in your team. I then think, as we'll discuss, Cunha has been exceptional, like truly exceptional. So you're probably looking at him as a great option. And João Pedro has been so good since coming back, and he's cheaper than Evanilson. So I just wonder where all of these forwards are fitting in. Like in previous seasons, we've struggled to get 3 good forwards in FPL. And now I would like to have like 6 forward spots. There are so many good ones to pick from. But yeah, Evanilson for me is, I don't think I could squeeze him in ahead of some of the other forwards. But maybe if you're not convinced by João Pedro, you could look to move to him, definitely. And then the only other player maybe I'd consider is Kirkes at that cheaper price. He does still get forward quite a lot. Bournemouth aren't an awful defence. I just think when I look at those fixtures, Wolves, Spurs, Ipswich, West Ham, United, Palace, they look much better for the attackers than they do the defenders. Like Wolves are a pretty decent attack. They just put 4 past Fulham. Spurs will score. Ipswich, for all that we say about them, they do score goals. West Ham might have a new manager by then. And also, I equally think that Jared Bowen on his day is very, very good. So you just never know there. Man United, based on the Ipswich game, not very good going forward. But you would expect at Old Trafford that they probably grab a goal. So listen, I still think Kirkes could be a decent shout. But I just think the fixtures definitely suit the attackers slightly more. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I guess the defenders for Brighton's maybe worth discussing because I'm getting a lot of questions around should I bring in Lewis Dunk if he's back fit? What about Estepinian? So in the absence of Dunk, it's been Igor and Van Hecke as their centre back. So Dunk is right footed. Igor is left footed. Van Hecke plays as the right centre back, and then Igor or Dunk will play as the left centre back. Because Igor's left footed and because his passing capability is good, and in all honesty, he's just a very good centre back, I've seen a lot of Brighton fans, and it is just fan opinion, which doesn't mean anything really, calling for Lewis Dunk to be on the bench when he comes back and to give Igor that starting spot. I don't think that will happen. Lewis Dunk's the skipper. He's also very experienced, and I think Hertz will want Lewis Dunk back in. But is he completely nailed? Maybe not, with Igor sat there playing very, very well as the left centre back. So, yeah, I probably would avoid Dunk for now, but if you want to take the risk, you can. I wouldn't go Igor just for the same reason. So really, it's probably Van Hecke or Estepinian for me. I just don't see much attacking threat from Estepinian. He's not shown much this season that suggests he's the Estepinian of old. Often he was playing that really advanced left wing back role when we really wanted Estepinian in the past, and I feel like there's a lot of nostalgia there with him. So I would probably just go for Van Hecke, but he doesn't have much attacking threat. He's okay for bonus. You're probably looking at 6 points if they keep a clean sheet, which isn't that inspiring. Obviously, Veltman has been playing very good minutes as well. I think he's played 80 plus minutes in all but one game this season. So maybe you look to a Veltman and you say you go there instead. But then once Kadioglu's back, it could be Kadioglu at right back and Estepinian at left back. Or they could even shift Van Hecke out to right back and play like Dunk and Igor as the centre backs, for example. So they have multiple options there. Even when Solly March comes back, he can play left back and right back. So I don't think Veltman, again, carries enough attacking threat to risk it. So all in all, I think the two best defenders to target is Van Hecke and Estepinian, but I would probably just go Van Hecke to save the money. So I think that's it for the Brighton and Bournemouth guys. I think both of them are definitely going to be in very desirable over the coming weeks. But along with Arsenal, I think Brighton are probably the team to target this week, especially against Southampton at home. I just see that if I had to predict it, it's probably like a 3-1 game, in which case that there's a chance for a clean sheet there, but you really want those attackers. So yeah, João Pedro, he's coming in. A real bore fest, honestly, the next game, which was Everton 0, Brentford 0. You had one of the most boring teams in the Premier League, and I'm sorry, Everton fans, you'll probably agree, in Everton, and then one of the more exciting teams in the league in Brentford. And sadly, Brentford got Everton, I would say. They stooped down to the level of just not being able to do much in that game. They definitely had their chances. I actually looked into the data, and it is incredible if you look at their home data versus away data. So Brentford at home this season have had 27 big chances versus 10 big chances away from home. So 17 more big chances at home. They've also had 65 shots in the box at home versus 29 shots in the box away from home. Now, what that is framing, because if I then give you the context, because I've seen loads of stuff, Brentford at the G-Tech are different beasts. And honestly, if you look at the data last season, they are better at home. But this season at home, they've already played Southampton, Ipswich, and Wolves, who are three of the worst defences in the league. And away from home, they've already played Man City, Liverpool, and Spurs. And I know Spurs aren't the best defence, but they're also not awful. And Man City at points have been struggling, but Liverpool are the best defence in the league. So there is definitely a shift, right? Brentford are more attacking and a better team at home, but I don't know that they're 17 big chances more in 12 games better at home, or in 6 games in each, right? I don't think there's that much of a stark contrast. But then when you look, they're playing Leicester at home this week, you look at the home data, you look what they have done to the likes of Southampton, Ipswich, and Wolves. You look at how good Mbeumo has been in those games. Let me just pull up his data against newly promoted teams, because it's crazy. Against Ipswich at home, 15 points. Against Southampton at home, 14 points. So both of Mbeumo's double-digit returns this season have come against Ipswich and Southampton, in which case, in both games, he scored a brace. Now, I'm not suggesting he'll score a brace against Leicester, but I do think you have to consider that Brentford and Mbeumo are both flat-track bullies. They like playing these teams at home that are newly promoted and very weak defences. So yeah, I could absolutely see Bryan Mbeumo doing well this week, but he does still look really quiet and really wide for large spells of the game. He's not talismanic, I wouldn't say. He's not getting the big chances himself. Wissa through the centre is the one that still looks the most likely to score in any given game. So I think Mbeumo from 14 onwards, when Brentford go on a run of fixtures, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Chelsea, Forest, Brighton, none of those stand out as like, oh, wow, like you really can't play Bryan Mbeumo in that game. But none of them also stand out as like been great fixtures for him. I have said on a few occasions that Brentford in those tougher games do sometimes play a 3-5-2 with Mbeumo up top. So maybe we will see him play a more advanced central position in the tougher games, and maybe that's when we'll start to see more returns for him. But as of right now, I'm not seeing enough for him to justify that price tag when I could move to an Anthony Gordon, a Jared Bowen, a Kara Matoma as well. I feel like there are enough options now where, due to his ownership as well, like he's very highly owned. I like the idea of trying to differentiate slightly if possible. If I see an asset that I still think is great going into a slightly tricky fixture run. The other side of the coin, though, Mbeumo is a 90-minute man most weeks, pretty much every week, and he's on penalties. And going into the busy period, taking out a player that has traditionally very good data, gets returns, is on penalties, and is always on the pitch, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a bad idea, but it also feels like, oh, is that really where you want to use your transfers? Taking out Brian Mbeumo. So yeah, I'm a bit on the fence. Let's see how he gets on against Leicester. If he has a bit of a quiet game, then I reckon that people will start to jump off Mbeumo quite quickly. Wissa obviously still continues to be a really nice asset. He did come off in the 72nd minute for Thiago, who is obviously their summer signing that they spent, I think it was like 40 plus million on. I do think this will be a common theme because they clearly bought Thiago thinking that they needed a replacement for Tony. Now, I don't think they anticipated Wissa being as good as he has been, but unless they plan on playing a 3-5-2 with Wissa and Thiago up top, or playing Wissa off the left and Mbeumo off the right, which could be a possibility, it's probably Wissa or Thiago. And if that's the case, I think it's still Wissa, but Thiago will definitely start to eat into his minutes. And once again, when we get to those midweek games, like in game week 14, could I see Wissa being sat on the bench? Potentially. I don't want to scaremonger. I don't think that will be the case, but I'm just saying that I think Thiago will start to eat into Wissa's minutes more and more. Obviously, Brentford did keep their first clean sheet of the season. I benched Vandenberg. Flecken got a big 9-pointer, I believe. I think that says more about Everton than Brentford. Like, Brentford had 10 men for like 30 plus minutes, didn't they? So I think it just goes to show that it might have even been more than that. When was the sending off in that Brentford game? I'll check. But when it was in the it was in the first half. So the whole second half, Everton had time to put the ball in the back of the net against a defence that haven't kept a clean sheet this season. Again, I think that says more about Everton than Brentford. But last season, Brentford were actually 7th for non-penalty expected goals conceded. So they're not a bad defence by any means, or at least over a larger sample size, they're not. But this season, they have really, really struggled to keep teams out. So let's see if it's a trend that changes. But they're going into a busy fixture run now. Very difficult fixtures from a defensive perspective. I really wouldn't be investing in the Brentford defence. And I think if you own Vandenberg or Pinnock or Collins, you're probably not hoping to start them in many weeks coming up. So the next game was Fulham 1, Wolves 4. Obviously, I was very happy in this game because I had Cunha free 16 points, but I do feel like, and I don't want to criticize Wolves or put down this achievement, because obviously I'm really glad they're starting to get points on the ball because I like Wolves a lot, but the 4-1 scoreline definitely does flatter Wolves. I don't use XG too much in this podcast. I try to use some other stats and eye tests because I don't want it to become like just an XG podcast, but the XG for Fulham was 1.02. The XG for Wolves was 1.25. Wolves on a consistent basis this season have struggled to put up a high number of XG. And what that essentially means, if you don't want to even look at XG, they're not creating a lot of high quality chances in a game. They might create 1 or 2, or they might create a few low quality chances, but they're struggling to put up 2+ XG in a given game, which is what you need to go out there usually and score 4+ goals. So yes, it was a fantastic performance, and I don't want to discredit that, but do just temper your expectations with what you might expect from Wolves moving forward, because Fulham are a really good defence, and considering 1.25 XG in a game isn't that bad. I also will put into context that in the 80th minute, Joachim Andersen got injured, who is Fulham's obviously best centre-back. At that point, Fulham had already made 5 substitutions, and because it wasn't a concussion injury, they therefore couldn't make another substitution to remove Andersen. That therefore meant that they were playing with 10 men and no Andersen for the final 15 minutes of the game, and that is when Wolves had one of their big chances and scored 2 of their goals. So it was actually 2-1 at 80 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that Fulham would have come back into the game, but they could have. So we could be looking here at 2-2 or 2-1, if not for that Joachim Andersen injury. So again, Wolves fans will probably be listening and watching and thinking, no, we were brilliant. And you did have a really nice performance. And honestly, the difference maker in this game was Matheus Cunha. He was absolutely exceptional. One of the better performances you'll ever see from a Premier League player. Like, he dominated that game from start to finish. Creativity, dribbling, movement off the ball, tracking back. Both goals were taken exceptionally well. The second goal was absolutely stunning. The assist was a beautiful reverse pass that completely fooled, I think it was Tete at right back. So it was a perfect performance from Matheus Cunha. And I was, again, very shocked because Fulham are a good defence. And Cunha, for everything good that he's been doing, he is struggling to generate big chances for him and his team. He's doing a lot of kind of great things on the ball, but it's not leading to those clear-cut opportunities. And in this game, again, he did actually miss a massive one-on-one, by the way, but there wasn't that many clear-cut opportunities. But he is so technically gifted that he can score from low XG chances. And this is where XG needs to be taken into account, right? If Cunha is as good as he is and in the form that he is in, then he will overperform his XG. We've seen it with Chris Wood at points this season. Bukayo Saka is another good example of a player that often overperforms his expected data. So, yeah, I just want to say Cunha was stunning in this game. And if you look at all of the things that you would want from a player, penalties, corners, minutes, goal threat, assist threat, I can't spot a single thing that Cunha fails to have from an FPL perspective, other than he plays for Wolves. And when I go back to this, 1.25 XG in a game isn't that much, right? The 4 goals is great, but Wolves need to do more for me. Like, I'm seeing a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, if you don't believe me, go onto my Twitter. I ran a captaincy poll earlier today and scroll through the comments. I would say that Cunha is in the top 5 most popular captaincy picks this week. And of course, there is recency bias. He's just come off the back of a 16-pointer. And honestly, he's not blanked since game week. He's only blanked once since game week 7, I believe. Let me get his data up here, because I obviously brought him on my wild card in game week 7. So since game week 7, it's 9-2, 9-6, 12, 16. He's coming off the back of back-to-back double-digit returns. So everything is pointing towards Matheus Cunha being, in the future, maybe a captaincy shout. I just think Bournemouth aren't a bad defence, at least not one of the worst defences in the league. And I just don't trust Wolves to put up enough chances on a consistent basis for me to trust Cunha with the armband. But I'll leave it there because he's still fantastic. There are a lot of questions around, is it too late to bring Cunha in? I don't think so. Like, the fixtures coming up are an absolute joke. So you have obviously missed a few of the good fixtures, but they are, if you look on Fantasy Football Hub and sort it by fixture difficulty from game week 13 to 18, they've got the second best fixtures in that run after Brighton. They play Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester, Man United. When in the next 5, 2 of them are against Ipswich and Leicester, it's difficult to sit here and say you've missed the boat with Cunha. So I honestly don't think you've missed the boat. In fact, I think Fulham was one of the tougher games, and he's just got a 16-pointer. So yeah, I'd absolutely still be looking to bring him in. So the only thing that would concern me is Wolves. But if they can continue to put up decent XG and create more chances, then I like them. Raul Jimenez is a very frustrating one. So he missed a massive chance. And when I say massive chance, again, go and watch the highlights. It was an open goal from 3 yards out. Now, it was a Robinson cross, and very unlucky if you have Robinson. He did fire the ball across, and it took a slight deflection. So I will take that into account. But regardless, when you're 3 yards out with an open goal, you hope that the striker will finish it. And Raul Jimenez just isn't in a nice run of form anymore. He's not scoring goals. His minutes seem to be around 70 to 75. And with that midweek game coming up, I do just wonder if Meniz might start one of the next 3. So I don't think Jimenez is a must sell. But if you've got a free transfer and you don't own João Pedro, Jimenez to João Pedro feels very, very obvious. And it does feel like an upgrade as well. Because you've got someone that's, again, still probably on penalties, slightly better data than Jimenez, playing in a better attack with a much better run of fixtures, and he's a little bit cheaper still at this point. So I just feel like that transition now away from Jimenez into João Pedro, because Fulham's fixtures coming up are diabolical, right? They've got Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal, Liverpool. They then have Southampton, but then it's Chelsea. Like, if you take the fixtures over the next 6, they are second bottom according to Fantasy Football Hub, with only Everton having a more difficult fixture run. So for me, I just can't justify hanging on to Raul Jimenez any longer when João Pedro sat there. I will just say Robinson was very unlucky. He should have had an assist for that Jimenez goal, or for that Jimenez shot. And he also whipped in 2 or 3 other really good crosses. I still think he's a fine hold. I just think, again, with the fixtures going up for Fulham, if you do have a spare defender slot transfer to use, I wouldn't rush him out of your team. But I equally think there are defenders with much better fixture runs coming now. And I just don't see how many clean sheets Fulham will get over the next 6 to 7 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one or none. There's just not many good chances for clean sheets. Smith Rowe had a poor game, I would say, in general. He was subbed in the 58th minute. We've seen this with a lot of players, though, right? Rodgers has been subbed pre-60 minutes before. He's been subbed just after the 60th minute as well. I still think Rodgers is a great asset, and I still think Smith Rowe is. It just comes back to the fixtures. If you can rotate Smith Rowe in and out for the slightly nicer fixtures, then I would probably be tempted to keep him. In all honesty, I still think he's great. He's returned really well this season. But if you can't rotate him and you need to rely on him in a lot of weeks, I think Smith Rowe is probably not the one for me anymore. So with all of your Fulham assets, I don't think you need to force them out this week. But if you have the free transfers, I also don't think it's a bad exit point for them. The next game, surprise of the game week, Man City 0, Spurs 4. What an insane result. And we know that Spurs can turn it on at any point, and we know that Man City haven't been playing well. But if I had my narrative biased head on, which I did, Pep Guardiola was getting players returning back during the international break. We also had Erling Haaland, who had 4 goals and an assist during the international break. And Pep Guardiola had just signed a contract extension. And City were playing at home. And Spurs had been in a poor run of form, losing back-to-back games against Galatasaray and Ipswich. And the players just clearly weren't really playing for Ange. And I think that's fair to say. Motivation levels looked in the bin. I thought this was set up for Spurs 0, City 4. If I had to guess, I probably would have said that. So this completely flipped on its head. And honestly, Spurs were brilliant. For everything that City did wrong, Spurs did right. And so it is difficult in these games to not put it down to City being absolutely woeful. But I think a lot of credit needs to go to Spurs because they put in an incredible performance. Haaland was so frustrating. And honestly, I can be emotional in relation to FPL. I can knee jerk. I can be angry. I can be happy. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person. One thing I'm not really is like salty in FPL. I don't tend to get too angry and jealous when other people's players return and my players don't. I was honestly in a really bad negative headspace after that Haaland blank because it just felt like, how are people getting this lucky? I looked at people that in game week 10, if you sold Haaland and brought in Salah and captain Salah instead of Haaland, in game weeks 10, 11 and 12, which is 3 weeks, you would be 56 points up. 56 points up, captaining Salah over Haaland in the last 3 weeks. Now, you might think that is disgusting, right? 56 points in 3 weeks, considering that in that time, Haaland has put up the same XG as Salah. It gets worse, though, because if you think about it, if you sold Haaland to get Salah in game week 10, you probably went out and got Cunha, and you probably sold someone like Semenyo. Semenyo's done nothing, and Cunha has gone nuclear, getting 28 points in the last 2. So what you are actually telling me is probably selling Haaland and Semenyo for Cunha and Salah in 3 weeks has net you like 80 points, maybe more. Might even be more, like 85 points. Now, I'm happy for you if you made the move. I own Salah. I've captained him in 2 of the last 3 weeks, and I own Cunha. So I'm not salty from a perspective of it's not really hurt me that much, but I held on to Haaland, and it just feels like, how has the man not done more? Like, I captained him not last week, the week before that. And it's just incredible. Like, he has, since the moment, if you've not seen this stat, since the moment that he told Arteta to stay humble, he has 2 goals from 8 XG. He is underperforming his XG by 6. That is remarkable. For a player that, I think we will all agree, across his career thus far, has largely been an excellent finisher. So, yeah, it's a very interesting one. What can you put it down to? It's form and confidence. Because people are saying, oh, yeah, but with KDB back, you can't sell Haaland now. Haaland's not struggling to get chances. He accumulated once again over 1 XG. He had another 2 big chances. The issue with Haaland isn't that he's not converting. Sorry, isn't that he's not getting the chances. It's that he's not converting the chances. So yeah, listen, when KDB was on the pitch, they looked so good once again. And Haaland got one of his big chances, assisted by KDB. But I just don't think that KDB being back suddenly makes Haaland good. And my issue with Haaland, before we then move on to some of the other players, is when are you captaining Haaland? The only week is maybe game week 14 against Forest at home. So maybe next week you might look to do it. Because outside of that, it's Liverpool, Forest, Crystal Palace, United, Villa, and Everton. So Crystal Palace, you say, yeah, that's not a bad fixture actually. But in that week, Liverpool have Everton away. So you would happily captain Salah, or you could even go for a Brighton asset against Leicester away or something like that, right? There are definitely alternatives. Arsenal have Fulham away. You could look to captain there. And then the only other good fixture there is game week 18 against Everton at home. But in that week, Arsenal have Ipswich at home, Chelsea have Fulham at home, and Liverpool have Leicester at home. So I think the only week really is game week 14, but I think I'm happy going elsewhere in that 1 week, especially as I know Arsenal just pretty much demolished Forest, but Forest aren't an awful defence. So it doesn't feel like a week where I desperately feel like I need Erling Haaland. So yeah, as you can probably tell by the way I'm talking, I think this is the week to sell Erling Haaland. There were a few questions came in around Erling Haaland. If you still own him, is there any world and justification in which you should keep Erling Haaland? I would say the only way I'd be willing to keep Erling Haaland is if I already owned Salah and one of Palmer Saka, and I wasn't desperate to get the other one that I don't have out of Saka and Palmer. Right? So as long as you've got Salah and you have one of Saka or Palmer, if you've got Haaland on top of that, and you don't feel like you're massively missing out on other assets, you're not that desperate to go out there and get, again, whichever of Saka and Palmer you don't have, you're not that desperate to go out there and get Isak, you're quite happy with your defense, then yeah, do you know what? Maybe you can hold on to Haaland. But if you've not got Salah, I know Salah's fixtures aren't that great coming up, but what are you doing? Like, he's just an absolute monster at the moment. So the only justification for keeping Haaland is if you've already got Salah and one of Saka or Palmer, because then really you're not sacrificing as much. I still think even in that position, though, which I'm in, if you've got the free transfers to do it, it's probably worth getting it done, because Haaland needs to be averaging now at this point. When you take into account how good Salah's been, Saka's been, and also Isak's going to smash it tonight, I'm sure of it, or other assets like Jackson, I was saying that Haaland needs to average like 8 to 10 points. I think Haaland needs to average now 12 points per game week to be worth it at 15 million. And he's not going to do that. That's abnormal. It's superhuman. We saw it in the first 4 or 5, and it quickly tailed off. So, yeah, sadly, until at least game week 19, I think I'll be going without Erling Haaland now. Interestingly, Rico Lewis started in midfield. So I actually thought he wouldn't start this game, but he started in midfield. I don't think he was very good. And I actually saw a Man City fan that they tweeted, Rico Lewis isn't a right back and he isn't a midfielder. I don't really know what he is. And that tweet had over 1,500 likes from other City fans. And they were all commenting very similar stuff of, yeah, Rico Lewis isn't a right back, right? He's not going to play that role very well. But he also looks a little bit out of place when you slap him in midfield. Where he looks best is when he plays right back and inverts. But even then, you're losing out on a right back, which is difficult against tricky opposition with someone like Heung-min Son or Luis Diaz. But I guess that does benefit them from a midfield perspective, especially in the absence of Rodri. So maybe we'll see that and we'll see him slot back into right back more often, and it'll be Kyle Walker that comes out. But basically, I just don't think Rico Lewis is a good option. The fixtures aren't there. He's honestly not got any attacking threat. He gets in advanced positions, but that doesn't transpire to actual FPL points. Rico Lewis just isn't it. So yeah, I think he's absolutely a sell. I would get rid of him as soon as you can. Interestingly, Gvardiol dropped, from a defensive perspective, a generational stinker. It was one of Gvardiol's worst performances I've ever seen in a Man City shirt. I would say he was definitely at fault for one of the goals, and the other goal, it was a bit of a team effort, but he was definitely in the top 3 players at fault for that goal. So he did not play well from a defensive perspective. But from an attacking perspective, it was scary. It was staggering how advanced he was. So he had 0.32 XG, which for a left back is ridiculous. And he had 0.58 expected assists, which is crazy. He had 8 key passes. 8. That's like scary numbers. That's a lot for someone like De Bruyne or Bruno Fernandes. He was, by all accounts, their best attacker in that game, Gvardiol. If Haaland had his finishing boots on, I saw someone say if Haaland didn't have steel toe caps on, if Haaland didn't have steel toe caps on in this game, I think Gvardiol comes away with probably 2 assists in this game. And he could have had a goal as well. So I still think if you have Gvardiol, I would absolutely be keeping. I understand there's probably some temptation to move to an Arsenal defender like Gabriel, Saliba or Timber. I'm not saying I would go out and buy a Gvardiol afresh with the fixtures they've got, but if I had him, I'd definitely be keeping him. Like he's going to get an attacking return at least in the next 3 games, potentially 2 or 3. He's so attacking. So yeah, definitely keep Gvardiol. On Spurs, Johnson was benched. I still think Johnson's probably in their first choice 11. The concern is it worked perfectly. Now, it might have just been specific to the Man City game, but Maddison was so good in that sole number 10 role, right? He wasn't in a number 8 role or even like an advanced 6 role that we've seen him at points this season where he's involved in the build-up. He was the number 10 and he looked so much better in that role, getting the 2 goals. But not only did Maddison look really good in the number 10 role, because Brennan Johnson wasn't playing, they pushed Kulusevski out to the right wing, which is his natural position. And as good as Kulusevski has been in the number 10 role, he again arguably looked even better on that right wing. So yes, Johnson could come straight back in. They could move Maddison back or bench him and play Kulusevski instead. I just see no reason why they wouldn't do that exact same thing again, where they play Maddison in the 10 and Kulusevski on the right. So I do worry about Brennan Johnson's minutes. Would I sell him? I wouldn't sell him in case I'm wrong. I'm not a Spurs fan. I'm also not Ange Postecoglou. He could just put Johnson straight back in. So that could happen. And in which case, I still think Johnson's really decent value. So I probably wouldn't sell Johnson now, but I would have in place a couple of ideas about being able to sell him in 14 or 15 if we see him sat on the bench again and we see Maddison and Kulusevski starting. On Kulusevski, I still think he could be a good FPL option. I just worry because he doesn't really get involved in those final actions too often. Like that dribble, if you didn't see it, by the way, for the goal where he whipped the ball to Solanke pulled it back and Porro finished. Kulusevski's part in that goal was incredible, but it wasn't close to goal. So Kulusevski does a lot of the work that is great for the team, but not from an FPL perspective. Maddison, if he continues to start, will be the one from an FPL perspective. He's on 0.8 XGI per 90 this season. To put into perspective how good that is, it's better than Saka, Son, Foden, Palmer, Solanke. I'm trying to think, Isak, Watkins. It's honestly up there with Erling Haaland as the best data in the league, James Maddison, when he started. The issue is he didn't start the 2 games prior to the Man City one. So how secure are his minutes? I don't know. I honestly think, sadly, that Spurs are just a bit of an avoid for now, unless you've already got them and you just want to hold them a bit longer. Like if you've got a Solanke, could you keep him? You absolutely could. Do I think he's better than Jackson Watkins or Isak? No. So it comes down to how many free transfers you have and how patient you want to be. But yeah, the Spurs assets are probably don't buy and probably don't sell unless you've got the free transfers and you feel like you could make a massive upgrade. Like Solanke to João Pedro to free up some funds for the midfield. Yeah, that does feel pretty nice. So then we move on to the Sunday games. So we have Southampton versus Liverpool. There's not much to talk about in this game for me from an FPL perspective other than just Salah. So Salah's now averaging 10 points per game in FPL this season. That's his 8th double-digit return in 12 weeks. So 8 out of the 12 weeks, he scored 10 plus points. He's now on 23 bonus points this season. In the entirety of last season, he had 24 bonus points. So he has 1 bonus point off what we saw in the entirety of last season this season. Also, last season, he had 9 double-digit returns, and he's on 8 already this season. So a couple of things. Do we expect this for him to maintain it at this level? No. Because if he averages 10 points per game week, he will land on 380 FPL points, which is comfortably the record-breaking season. I think he's the only player to ever achieve over 300, which he achieved once. When I think he got 303. Let me double check that because you can check that on the site. But history, yeah. So 303 points in the 2017-2018 season, and that is the only time ever. So is he going to get 380 points this season? No. And they will tail off. And I think the fixtures are starting to get a little bit more difficult now. And I think we will start to see Salah's numbers drop off. But I also think that he could break his record this season. And he's going to be pushing high 280s, 290s, you'd imagine. What more do you want from the man? Like, he's on the pitch every available minute. He's taking penalties. He's creating chances. He's great for bonus points. He's finishing the chances too. It is very weird when you watch Liverpool, because Salah just doesn't turn up for the first half. Salah doesn't believe in first half. Of course, he does sometimes score, but generally when you watch Liverpool, Salah just is rubbish in the first half. His touch is heavy. He doesn't score goals. He doesn't seem interested. And then in the second half, you start to see him string some things together. And you're like, oh, Salah's woken up a bit. And then he'll just get a random goal that just feels like it comes out of nowhere. We've seen it. And I own Salah. I love him. He's been my captain. So this isn't salty, but he pops up, he gets gifted goals. Let's be real. Like the first goal in game week 12, like what was that keeping from McCarthy? It was terrible. The game against Aston Villa, when the ball was just given straight to him for his goal, it does just feel like he finds himself in the right place at the right time, but the ball just lands at his feet. And there is an art to that, clearly, because it's happened on such a consistent basis. What I love about him is he's so desperate to score. And I feel like that is something that is intangible. Like you can't measure that aspect with Salah. He is so goal hungry. He will do anything to score a goal. And there aren't many players out there in the Premier League that are that desperate to score and that desperate until the last second. Salah is sprinting to score goals in the 94th minute. And that is such a valuable thing to have in a player. And it's why he does often do so well towards the end of games. So yeah, in this game, he only got 2 bonus points, it looks like, by the way, because he missed 3 big chances and he took his shirt off and got a yellow card. So it looks like it'd be a 13-pointer. In terms of whether he was lucky to get 13 points then, I actually don't think so, because after the goal that he was gifted and the penalty, which was, you could say lucky, it was a penalty. He scored a penalty, he's a penalty taker. After that, he missed 3 big chances and he really should have completed his hat trick. So I think when you put it all together, 13 points is probably about fair. And it honestly could have been so much worse for non-owners. And I just think you just got to get him. Really. He just feels inevitable every week. We keep saying it will slow down. And as of right now, it's not. And I feel like the time to not have Salah is when it slows down. Trying to predict when it's going to happen feels like a dangerous game to me. Like you could say, oh yeah, but he's fixtures. Because honestly, Liverpool's fixtures aren't that fantastic. If we just get back to the fixtures. They've got Man City, Newcastle, Everton in the next 3. Newcastle are looking a lot better. We'll see how they get on tonight against West Ham. Man City, at the moment, looks like it could be a decent fixture, but you just never know with them. Everton, Merseyside derby, that could be a tight game. Fulham aren't a bad defence. Spurs have actually got decent defensive data. Like the next 5 fixtures, do I expect Liverpool to win 4 of the 5 or 5 of the 5? Yes. And do I expect them to score goals? Yes. But at the same time, it's not like, oh, I'm really nervous not having Salah for that run of fixtures. So let's see how it goes. I just think own him until the returns start to dry up. And at that point, you're probably safe to move away. I do think that Szoboszlai was excellent in this game. He played much more like a number 10 than like a number 8. And he was much more effective in terms of those final actions. Obviously, he took the goal very well. He just looked a little bit more involved in and around the box. I don't know if that was specific to the game because Southampton left a lot of space in that position that Szoboszlai was operating in. And it's why I think Cole Palmer in Game Week 14, assuming he starts, will be so good against Southampton because Szoboszlai had so much joy in that central midfield role. But yeah, if he can keep that up, maybe when the fixtures improve, he becomes an FPL option. I still think Konate is great value, by the way. But with the fixtures over the next 5, I see maybe 1 or 2 clean sheets maximum for Liverpool. Konate doesn't have much attacking threat. And the other concern now, if you don't already own Konate, is he's on 4 yellow cards. So I think considering it's City and then Newcastle, considering the fixtures even after that aren't perfect, considering the 4 yellow cards, the lack of attacking threat, he's gone up in price now. I think you've missed the boat with Konate for now. Hopefully he picks up his suspension before we then want to bring him back in. Around game week 18, 19, I think is when we'll probably start to look back at Liverpool defenders. If you own Konate, it's not worth a transfer removing him because not many defenders are very good. He is still playing for what has been the best defence in the league this season, and they could still keep some surprise clean sheets. So I think if you own Konate, you keep and start him. But I think if you don't already own him, it's probably not the best time to go out there and buy him. So the final game of the game week in terms of what I've seen, because again, I'm recording this before Newcastle West Ham, was my team. So Ipswich 1, Man United 1. I'm a Man United fan. So what to make of this? I actually want to start with Ipswich before we move on to Manchester United. They were really good. They probably deserved to win. If either team deserved to win, they definitely deserved a draw. So if anyone says they didn't, then they're lying. I thought Ipswich were really good. Interestingly, they only conceded 0.9 XG, or Manchester United only accumulated 0.9 XG. That was the 4th best defensive performance in Game Week 12. So, I think 2 things there. United were really blunt, which we'll discuss. But also, I thought Ipswich were really well structured in that game. And I don't think they gave us too much. So, maybe what I was saying at the start of the season, maybe Ipswich will start to develop and learn, and they're not going to be the worst defence in the Premier League. Because as of right now, they are still, according to the data, the worst defence. But that was definitely a better defensive performance. In terms of the players that played well, Hutchinson was so good on the ball with the ability to turn and drive at the defence. Delap and Davis were so good. And they are, from an FPL perspective, the ones you'd really want. And Tuanzebe, I was really happy to see him have a good game. I heard the stat that 10 years ago he was voted our young player of the season at Man United. So, or it was maybe even over a decade now, but really nice to see him have a good game. Like I said, from an FPL perspective, it really is Delap and Davis, the only 2 that I'd consider. Delap created another big chance, 0.3 XG. And if I read out his data, every game, the man could come away with an assist. So, 0.29 XGI, 0.19, 0.31, 0.32, 0.34, 0.52. Leif Davis is comfortably the most attacking defender in the Premier League. He's created the most big chances in the Premier League by a number of 8. What more do you want? Apart from he plays for the worst defense in the league. But from an attacking perspective, like, I'm still really happy to have Leif Davis. I think I'm going to be starting him this week, and they'll concede. They won't keep clean sheets. But if they can limit it to 1 goal, if Leif Davis had got an assist in that game, he probably comes away with bonus points because he's not losing all of the points from conceding so many goals. Because if you don't know, players lose 4 points in the bonus point system for conceding every goal. So if they concede 4 goals, he's losing 16 in the bonus point system. He's never getting close. But if they can limit it to 1 or 2 goals and Davis can get some attacking returns, I actually really still like him as an option. I don't think he's up there as one of the better defenders, but if you've got him, I don't think you sell him. And then Delap was so good. I will bet my life savings that Delap is at a Premier League team next season. Maybe it's Ipswich. Maybe Ipswich will stay in the Prem. But even if they do, I wonder if he'll be a slightly better club in terms of overall quality. He's just too good. His ability to, again, drive with the ball. He's good in the air. His finishing's good. He's athletic. He reads the game well. I really was impressed by Delap, and I think he's growing into the Premier League this season. So really, honestly, Ipswich was so good. Man United, though, didn't help themselves. I would say that our best player was Andre Onana. He was probably man of the match, which tells you something. When your best player is your goalkeeper against the newly promoted side, something's gone wrong. The game obviously started very well for Man United, and I was like, Amarim ball, we're going to absolutely cook here, and it didn't turn out that way. In terms of the way that we were structured, it was indeed a 3-4-3. So I've seen some people think it was going to be a 4-2-3-1. Amarim definitely lined up in a 3-4-3. And to be fair to Amarim, he said we will see an idea, and for everything that we didn't do very well, there was definitely more of an idea. You could see the general structure formation that he was going for. So it was 3 centre-backs, which was Evans, De Ligt, and Mazraoui as the right centre-back. I do think Mazraoui was very good in that role. I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue playing as a left or right centre-back because he's good with both feet. He's good defensively. Physically, he's not bad, and he reads the game quite well. So, yeah, Mazraoui was in there. Once Euro comes back in as a centre-back, though, and Martinez is fit, well, then it's probably Martinez, De Ligt, and Euro, which means that Mazraoui no longer has a space. So that is the only concern with Mazraoui. At that point, does he become a wing-back, or is he a backup centre-back? I don't know. He might become more like a squad player. As the wing-backs, we then had Dalot at left wing-back and Ahmad at right wing-back. I was surprised about this because I thought Ahmad would be perfect in that number 10 role in Amarim's system. But Ahmad was, other than Onana, probably our best player in that game. He created the goal for Marcus Rashford. His defensive work was really good. His positioning left a little bit to be desired, but I just think generally it was a very good performance from Ahmad at right wing-back. So if Ahmad continues playing right wing-back, we sometimes in FPL call it an out-of-position player, which is OOP. I think the opposite is POO, P-O-O, which is out of position but in the wrong direction. So he would essentially be listed as a midfielder playing as a defender, but it's not really a defender. If we can have, I think, is he 4.9 million, Ahmad? Let me double check that whilst I'm talking about. If Ahmad becomes relatively nailed on as the right wing-back, 4.9 million, I quite like him as an option. Like the fact that he played 90 minutes up against Leif Davis, he was bombing up and down that wing, shows his fitness is pretty good too. So Ahmad was a standout for me. In the midfield, you can largely ignore it. We had Eriksen and Casemiro, but it should be Ugarte and Mainu once they're fully fit. The front three was interesting. So Rashford played as the 9. We had Bruno Fernandes as the right 10, and we had Garnacho as the left 10. I think that Rashford struggled in that game quite a lot, so I don't know if it would be preferred more as a number 10 moving forward or whether it would just be him on the bench with Højlund as the 9, but Rashford didn't have a good game at all. I thought Garnacho looked good at points. He got on the ball a lot. He was probably one of our more lively attackers, but it still left a little bit to be desired. I wonder whether Højlund as the 9 with Rashford and Garnacho rotating in that left 10 role might be the more likely outcome. Bruno Fernandes was the most disappointing player, though. He just struggled to get on the ball quite a lot in the first half. In the second half, he got on the ball a lot more, but it was when he was dropping deep. And once Xerxes and Højlund came on, he actually played as a central midfielder rather than as a number 10 in behind the striker. So I didn't see anything from Man United that made me want to invest. If I owned Bruno right now, based on that performance, I would be worried. I really would. But you keep him for the Everton game, and then you reassess. Because if he scores a brace against Everton and looks really attacking, then we suddenly change. It's one game. It's very difficult to draw conclusions from one game, but I wasn't very impressed with Man United. The only 2 players really I'd be looking at is Ahmad and Onana off the back of that game, because Dalot I don't think was very good at left wing back. Will he continue to start? Probably. But again, once Mazraoui comes out of that centre-back role, could we see him play a wing back role? We definitely could. Ahmad could even switch out to left wing back. We've also heard rumours that Antony could be used as a right wing back or a left wing back. We just don't know with Man United. And why would you invest in them? Right? After the Everton game, it's Arsenal, Forest, and City in 3 games. So let's reassess Man United in game week 17. That's the time when we'll start to look again. And at that point, we might know a little bit more about whether we want to and exactly which players are favoured under Amorim. So there we go. That is it. Like I said, we do also have the Newcastle West Ham game. If I'm going to predict that game, I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. I think it'll be 3-0 Newcastle. I think a goal and an assist for Isak, and I think Lewis Hall will keep a clean sheet. I'm not saying that to jinx it. I have no impact over the game. I just think this is a really nice game for Newcastle, and I think Isak and Hall are 2 assets that I'd really like to own moving forward. And I expect Isak to definitely be in my thinking for game week 13 and beyond. So guys, you all know by now that this podcast is sponsored by Club, the brilliant free-to-play mobile fantasy football game. And if you want to check it out, there will be a link down below in the description or linked in my bio if you're watching this on social media. And what this essentially is like I said, it's free-to-play fantasy football mobile game where you build up your club and you scout players each week to try and improve your club. This is my club as things stand. I'm actually really happy with it. And if you look at the individual fixtures coming up, like Estepinan's got great fixtures, Dallow's got Everton this week, I've got Semedo in there, Olarena against Ipswich, the defence looks really good, the forward line's nice, I've got Welbeck in there, I've loaned Mbermo in for his Leicester at home game, but my midfield is all over the place. I've got Baleba was suspended, and I've got Smith Rowe and Joelinton that they're not really ideal for the upcoming period. And so I don't really even have a third midfielder to play. So ideally, I need a midfielder to bring into my team. And you can see this week, I actually only got 93 points. I've had an absolutely stinking week in fantasy on Club, and my opponent has 183 points. So I really need a midfielder. So I'm going to meet with Manny now to try and place myself on the leaderboard, try and get a highly rated player to improve my club. But more importantly, fingers crossed, get a midfielder. And you can meet with your agent every 4 hours. So this is important. I need this right now. So I'm going to meet with the agent, and fingers crossed it's a good player and a midfielder. Okay, do you know what? That's actually really good. Gomez of Wolves, I believe, is a midfielder, has Bournemouth at home this week, and actually improves my team. It's very rare that you get what you ask for from Manny. Manny can be a little bit unpredictable with who he scouts for you. So I'm going to bring him in, and then he's going to go straight into my 11, actually, I think, this week, because I actually really need a midfielder because of Baleba's, obviously, suspension. So there we go. Simple as that. How many points has he got recently? Yeah, look, against Fulham with that goal, 36 points, 28 against Crystal Palace. Only 79 rated, so in terms of getting me on the leaderboard, that's not actually fantastic. But in terms of improving my fantasy team, which is the most important thing for me, I really like that. So yeah, if you want to check out Club, already available in some countries, so check out the link to see if it's available in yours. It'll be available in others very, very soon. I've seen some of the plans for the future for Club, by the way. Outstanding. Like, I don't usually get this involved with projects because I'm a busy man, but Club is something that I am so passionate about and excited by. So if you want to check it out, if you want to get involved with Club yourself, use the link in the description or the link in my bio, check it out. And if you do get involved, let me know. There were some other questions just to answer. I think I've answered some of these, so I'm just going to go through and make sure that I'd have. The first was around captaincy. So someone said, with João Pedro at home to Southampton, Wood at home to Ipswich, and Mbermo at home to Leicester, and considering Salah's, and they put in brackets, tricky fixture, is this the week to go for a differential captain? So, the short answer is honestly yes, it probably is. Whenever there is a week where the most popular captaincy options, which is probably Salah, Palmer, and Haaland in any given week, don't have standout fixtures, it is immediately the week where you are open to a differential captain, because whilst 1, if not 2 or 3 of Salah, Palmer, Haaland will probably do well this week, it's more unpredictable, and you probably would imagine that the ceiling is a lot lower than it would be if they were playing a newly promoted side. So yes, it is absolutely a week where you could look to captain someone else. The issue is, as you've put in your quotation marks, Salah's tricky fixture doesn't look so tricky right now. Man City are getting really hurt in transition. They aren't as bad when they have to sit a little bit deep and teams try and play around them. It's when they commit loads of men forward and then they get caught on the counter or in transition. That is where Liverpool and Salah are so devastating, especially at the end of games. So I can definitely foresee Salah getting 2 or 3 big chances in this game. And so, yes, you look at it on paper and you say City at home is a tricky fixture. But then when you say that over the last 6, City are in the bottom half of the table for expected goals conceded, they struggle in transition, and you look at the form that Salah's in, I do wonder if this is a tricky fixture for Salah. Is it not just a really nice matchup based on everything that we can see at the moment? So that would be my only concern. Also, Palmer against Aston Villa at home. I do also feel like this is a pretty good matchup for Cole Palmer because Villa will go for it. They don't sit back and they don't sit back in a low block and defend really deeply. So I also feel like this could be a decent matchup for Cole Palmer, also playing at home. I wouldn't be looking at Erling Haaland based on the fact that Liverpool have been really good defensively. It's at Anfield, and I just don't back Erling Haaland at the moment. So I think those two are both genuinely really good captaincy options, despite the fact that on paper, you might look at it and say City and Villa, they're not easy games. But yeah, there are some really other good options. In terms of premiums, Son versus Fulham, I don't like it because Son's minutes haven't been good. And I also still think, despite the fact they just conceded 4 to Wolves, Fulham aren't a bad defence. They're not pushovers. So I actually actively do not like a Spurs attacker. As good as Spurs have been, by the way, they've been the best attack in the league this season. If you look at expected goals, it's not a fixture that I would desperately want to target. So the only other premium is Saka. The issue is I've listed all of the options this week. Saka's the only one playing away from home. And that doesn't mean everything. But when I'm trying to find an edge, I wonder if I'd rather just captain a player in a home fixture. I tend to lean towards the home fixture wherever possible. And usually that does serve me quite well. Obviously, this week it wouldn't have. Like if you'd have captained Haaland at home rather than Salah at home, rather than Salah away, then that wouldn't have gone very well. So it's not all about home versus away, but that does often give you the edge a little bit. So if you're not going to go for Salah, Palmer, Son, Saka, Haaland, as you say, there are some other really good options. And Mbeumo, we spoke about, in those 2 games this season, he scored 15 points against Ipswich and 14 points against Southampton. Against Wolves at home, which is another good game, he's got 8 points. Against West Ham at home, which was another good game, he's got 9 points. In home games, Crystal Palace at home, he got 9 points. The man just delivers against weak opposition at home. It's all set up for an Mbeumo haul. I just think I've not been very impressed with him from a personal perspective in terms of the way that he's playing. For FPL, for Brentford, he's great, but for FPL, I want him closer to the goal. So yeah, I'm less convinced by Brian Mbeumo at the moment, but fixtures-wise, it kind of all points towards it being a very good one for him, which then leaves the 3 cheap forwards. So João Pedro against Southampton at home, Wood against Ipswich at home, and Cunha versus Bournemouth at home. I would rule out Cunha, because I actually think that Bournemouth are a decent enough defence, and I don't trust Wolves to consistently put up the number of chances required for Cunha to get a 16-pointer on a regular basis. Remember that the game before that, it was against Southampton at home, who are one of the worst defences in the league. So I don't look at this Bournemouth at home game and think I'd love to captain Cunha. I think owning Cunha is enough for me. Wood and João Pedro, though, are genuinely both captaincy shouts. They're playing against the 2 worst defences in the league in Southampton and Ipswich. João Pedro is on an insane run of form. My concern with João Pedro is he's probably going to get 60 to 70 minutes again. And so would I rather 90 minutes of Salah or 60 minutes of João Pedro or 70 minutes of João Pedro? I think I maybe slightly prefer 90 minutes of Mohamed Salah, despite the fixture not being quite as good. On Chris Wood, you could get a little bit spooked by the fact that he was benched in game week 12, but I really do think that was a rest based on the fact that he had a lot of minutes in the international break and a lot of travelling. So I expect Chris Wood to start and probably get close to 90 minutes. So I honestly think Chris Wood might be a marginally better captaincy option than João Pedro in game week 12. So at this very early stage, which is Monday afternoon, my ranking of the captaincy options is fairly muddled, but I would still have Salah marginally on top. And I think that's probably the way that I'm leaning at the moment. It's not due to his ownership. It's not due to trying to be safe. It's just due to trying to look at that Man City game for what it actually is rather than it being Man City and saying that I think City could lose this quite badly once again. So yeah, maybe we back City to rebound and we're like, do you know what? Maybe City pull something back, but I'm seeing no evidence that they're going to at the moment. I'd love to know in the comments what you're thinking for captaincy. Another question, would you prioritize Palmer or Saka this week if you don't own either? The way that I would frame this is probably look at it and think, are you going to captain either of them over the next 4 or 5 weeks? So go through captaincy each week. When I've looked at it, I think there is a chance that I captain Palmer in 2 of the next 5. I don't know that I definitely will. I could end up just captaining Salah instead. But I don't see any weeks where I want to captain Saka until maybe, is it Ipswich in 18? I should know all of the fixture stuff by heart now. It is Ipswich in 18. Check me out. They play against Ipswich in game week 18 at home. That's the first game. Because over this spell, they've got West Ham United, Fulham, Everton, Palace. It's a really nice run of fixtures for Arsenal. But none of them stand out when you look at all the alternatives for captaincy. And then even in 18, I think there are viable alternatives. Whereas with Palmer, I just think there are fixtures coming up where I could see myself giving him the armband. So I think I would still marginally prefer to bring in Palmer ahead of Saka. But if you're telling me that you don't think you're going to captain either of them, then maybe you do just take a punt on Saka because he's going to be slightly lower owned. He's in a nice run of form at the moment. We know that, of course, he had that bit of a break during the international break. Erdegaard's back. Maybe this is a run now where Arsenal are going to go on a really nice run. Also, I would say this week, the fixture, it's away, but they're probably playing against a weaker defence in West Ham. So yeah, I would still go Palmer ahead of Saka, but I think it is extremely close. I think we spoke about this already, but someone said thoughts on finally letting go of Haaland, or with his falling ownership, is it an idea to hold as he will come good at some time? I still think if you don't have Salah, get rid of Haaland and buy Salah. If you've got Salah and one of Palmer or Saka, there is some justification to keep Erling Haaland and stick with that 3 premium structure. I'm going to be selling Haaland, I think, because I'd just like to redistribute the funds and just make my team stronger in general. Is it too late to buy Cunha? Again, answer is no. There was a question about would you be buying him for 5 games, or do you think that Cunha is a season or long-term hold? It is absolutely only for the next 5 games. Wolves' fixtures jump off an absolute cliff. So between now and 17, they play against Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester. It's an insane run of fixtures. They then after that don't have a green fixture until 27. So they play against Spurs, Forest, Newcastle, Chelsea, Arsenal, Villa, Liverpool, Bournemouth away. There are some okay games in there, and Cunha is decent, but that is not a run of fixtures you want Cunha for. I would say that if you're not getting Cunha now or next week, it's probably, I don't know if it's done actually, because he plays Ipswich and Leicester in 15-16. It's a tough one. I think that you want to jump on Cunha as soon as possible, because I think it is a 5-game week horizon that you're probably looking to own him. And so if you can bring in Cunha this week, I absolutely think it's worth considering. The next question is, if you could buy any defender below the price of 5 million, who would you now go for? This just comes down to who you already own. There's no point me sitting here and saying, I think Lewis Hall is great, if in the weeks that you need a defender to rotate with your current options, Lewis Hall's got a bad fixture. And that's kind of the position that I'm in myself. So I've got Leif Davis, Vandenberg, not great, Ait-Nouri and Gabriel. If I look at the weeks where I would want to play a defender, it's not really the weeks that Lewis Hall has as a good fixture. The weeks when I need a defender, Brighton and Chelsea have really good fixtures. All of the weeks when I need a defender to rotate with my current ones. So for me, I think Lewis Hall is a better option than Van Hecke or Colwell or Gusto. But my team, it probably suits going out and buying Van Hecke or Colwell probably slightly more, as boring as that is, and as much as I don't think they're quite as good. So I think rotations is as important as the player that you're bringing in if you're trying to maximize and optimize for points. You could also say, just screw that. I'd rather just bring in the better player, in which case you can go out there and get Lewis Hall, who for me probably is the standout. I don't yet know how he gets on in Game Week 12 on Monday night, but I would expect him to have a pretty good game. Outside of that, I still don't think Luka Dean's an awful pick to go out there and get, but I do worry that we now know that Maatsen can play a game in the Premier League, and he wasn't great, but he also wasn't diabolical. So you could see that happen again, especially with midweek fixtures. So really, it probably is Lewis Hall, a Brighton defender, which would be Van Hecke for me, or a Chelsea defender, which would be Colwell or Gusto. I don't think there's anyone I desperately want outside of that at the moment. And I think you just reassess. If you can just get away with playing whoever you've got in the defense for now, it might be that in a couple of weeks, some other options emerge and we can start to move there. Would you sell Raul Jimenez for João Pedro for a -4 hit? Probably not. Probably not for a -4 here. If it's for free, I'd almost definitely do it. Unless you've got another position that you can use your free transfer on, which would massively upgrade your team more. I wouldn't say waste your free transfer, but it kind of feels like a bit of a luxury move. But if I look over the next 3 or 4 weeks, who do I think will score more points, João Pedro or Jimenez? It's definitely João Pedro. So yeah, I think due to Raul Jimenez being out of form, his minutes dropping off slightly and the fixtures coming up, I would definitely do it for free. I would be somewhat tempted to do it for a hit, but I don't think it's an obvious, get it done even for a -4 hit. I think it's team dependent and how much you think that Jimenez could be rotated over the next couple of fixtures as well. Cool. There we go then. So that is Game Week 12 reviewed and some of your key questions answered. Of course, we don't actually have a guest this week, so I'm going to do the prediction game for FPL Therapy myself. So if you are new to FPL Therapy, firstly, if you're still listening or watching, please do rate 5-star on audio and make sure to like and importantly subscribe on YouTube. But every week we ask the guest to select 3 differentials under 10% that they think will perform well for the upcoming game week. So honestly, I didn't have much notice this morning because the guest cancelled due to travel. It wasn't their fault, but on the train here, I had to pick 3 differentials at the last second. So maybe not as much research as I would have liked going into this, but to try and place me in that top 10, my 3 differentials are, firstly, Kaoru Mitoma at 5.6%. I did almost go for Jorginho Ruta, but I just think Mitoma's minutes have been slightly better. Maybe that goal in game week 12 will inspire him a little bit for game week 13. And it's Southampton at home. He's only 5.6% owned. I think this could be a really nice matchup for him. And I actually watched the Liverpool versus Southampton game. Southampton struggled down their right-hand side. I think Gakpo was arguably Liverpool's best attacker before he came off. So I really, really like the idea of Mitoma maybe making the most of the fact that they're a little bit weak down that right-hand side. So yeah, Mitoma, really nice matchup, really good fixture. Hopeful that he can come away with a return. The next player is actually Martin Ødegaard, who's down at 4.3%. He's usually, when he's fully fit, well above 10%. I still think, obviously, Saka's better. I don't think Ødegaard's likely to go out there and get 3 or 4 returns. But based on what I saw, he will definitely chip in with assist. He'll get the odd goal himself as well. He does take some set pieces. And I think Arsenal will probably win this game 3-1, 4-1, something like that once again. So Ødegaard is probably involved in that. So he's a bit of like I would say a lower ceiling, but a higher floor. I would definitely expect a return from him if Arsenal do manage to beat West Ham quite comfortably. So yeah, first 2 picks, Mitoma and Ødegaard. And then the third and final one, maybe not the best long-term pick now, but for game week 13, I think he's really good, which is Wissa against Leicester at home. He's up at 8.4%. And yes, he probably will get an early sub for Thiago, but it's Brentford at home against the newly promoted side. We spoke about this with Mbeumo. I'm expecting lots of big chances for Wissa in this game, and I think it's a fantastic fixture to target. So there we go. My 3 players, Mitoma against Southampton at home, Ødegaard against West Ham away, and Wissa against Leicester at home. I'd love to know if you're watching at this point. Thank you very much for still watching, by the way. Make sure to drop your 3 differentials down below in the comments, and we'll see if you'll manage to outscore the top of our leaderboard. And by the way, the top of our leaderboard is still Praz with 20 points. So I think that's beatable. I think this is the week where I go top of my own leaderboard. Also, I'm doing a solo pod next week as well. So I'm going to get 2 chances to go top of my leaderboard. It's probably not very fair, but it's the way it is. You know what I mean? Right. So, final thing then, just to discuss my team and my own transfer plans as things stand. So, if you are listening rather than watching, my team with 3 free transfers and 0.2 million in the bank is Sanchez in goal against Aston Villa at home, a back 3 of Gabriel against West Ham away, 8 Nuri against Bournemouth at home, and Leif Davis against Forest away. I do have Vandenberg on the bench against Leicester at home. I should have probably noted Steve Cooper's been sacked, so there could be a new manager bounce for Leicester, which is partially the reason I've got Vandenberg on the bench, because you'd expect them to score with a new manager in charge. Rumours that it could be Rude coming in. I've seen Potter as well, not Harry, of course, Graham. And so, yeah, I think they'll probably do slightly better as a result. So maybe Vandenberg on the bench and Leif Davis starting. My midfield 4 at the moment is Rodgers against Chelsea away, Salah against City at home, currently got the armband, and Mbeumo against Leicester at home, and Palmer against Villa at home, with Dibbling on the bench. With my transfers, I don't plan on starting Rodgers against Chelsea away because it's a clash against Sanchez, and it's just not a fixture I expect him to do that well. And then my front 3 at the moment is Haaland against Liverpool away, Cunha against Bournemouth at home, and Rao against Spurs away. So this team doesn't look great right now, but I've got 3 free transfers. And when you look at the 3 free transfers that I'm planning, it just makes the team brilliant immediately. So the 3 planned transfers at the moment is Haaland, Dibbling, and Rao out. So getting rid of Dibbling finally to give me some more squad depth, and removing Haaland and Raul Jimenez. And the idea would be to bring in Isak, Saka, and João Pedro. Again, I'm recording this before Isak's performance. If he's terrible or he gets injured, I'd probably look at either Watkins or Jackson, who I think are actually 2 really decent shouts. And I wouldn't mind that. But at the moment, I do favour Isak. So Isak, Saka, and João Pedro coming in. What that would then leave the front 7 being is Saka, Salah, Mbeumo, Palmer, Cunha, João Pedro, Isak. At that point, the team all of a sudden just looks fantastic. Then, by the way, my 7 attackers are all on penalties. All 7 of them, bar Rodgers, who would be on the bench this week, who isn't. But we said there's a chance he could. 7 of my 8 attackers are on penalties. It also then gives me that squad depth by having Rodgers as my 8th attacker. And it also gives me 1.3 million in the bank. Even with price changes this week, I should be left with around 1 million in the bank after those changes. So they just feel like three obvious transfers that I want to make. And it just feels like it would massively upgrade my team. And so I think I am set on probably selling Erling Haaland this week. Of course, I don't have to do that, right? I could make it another set. I could just do like Raul Jimenez to João Pedro and keep Haaland and Rodgers in there. But Rodgers has Chelsea, Haaland's got Liverpool. I'm not captaining Haaland anytime soon. Why not use this opportunity to upgrade my team, upgrade my squad depth, and bring in attackers that actually have favourable fixtures? So yeah, nice and simple for me this week. That's the current plan. Cool. So guys, there it is. There is the end of the solo pod. Again, hopefully this was okay for you. Some of you I know like the solo pods. If you do prefer the solo pods, let me know. There will be more of them over the busy Christmas period because I'm recording at all sorts of times and dates, and like next week we have to upload as soon as we record. So I'm going to do a solo pod because that's a lot easier. So there will be more podcasts where I don't have a guest, but hopefully it's still enjoyable and hopefully you do get that insight. And of course, I still have some really exciting guests lined up when travel allows and sickness doesn't prevent me from recording. So apologies again for missing last week, but I am back now and there will be an episode next week. So if you are wondering about that, by the way, this goes live on a Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. every single week. But like I said, next week's will go live on Monday afternoon at some point. As soon as I've finished editing the podcast, it will go live because we have a Tuesday deadline. So don't miss next week's midweek deadline for Game Week 14. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to rate 5-star, and I'll catch you next time. Bye, guys.